Fire Service Leadership Training Series. As you just saw in the notification there, this session will be recorded. Speaking of that, we are going to post all the recordings of this session and the others. That should be up later this week on the State Fire Chiefs website. We depend on your evaluations of this. This is a grant-funded program. And so later on in the meeting, we'll be putting up a link to both the evaluation. Please do that. It helps us run this series and know what you're looking for out of this series. There'll also be a link to the certificate. We'll put that up later in the meeting, the training certificate for attending this training. I will be monitoring the chat box. So if you do have questions or things you'd like to discuss, part of the reason we're here is for Chief Page's presentation, and part of it is just a discussion. All of us are dealing with the same issues with recruitment and retention, and get together and talk about what we're doing and what's working and what's not working. So tonight our presenter is Chief Joe Page. I'm going to read a bio real quickly here. Thanks so much to Chief Page for doing this presentation. We did do this one earlier, but we started at the wrong time in March, and so we're gonna do it again here so everybody can catch it. So thanks to Chief Joe Page from Whitefish Fire Department. Joe started his career as a volunteer at Vista Fire Department in New York in 1983. Was there for 15 years, making his way up to chief before moving for his job as a circuit board designer. Moved to New Hampshire with Amherst Fire Department, and then back to New York, volunteering with Carmel Fire Department. Moved cross country out to Colorado, volunteering for Elk Creek Fire Department, and made Rookie of the Year in 2004. So it just took him a few tries. He was hired as training chief and safety officer for Elk Creek, moved up to assistant chief and interim fire chief. Came up to Montana with us in 2013 as assistant chief at Whitefish, and was named fire chief in 2014. So with experience across 5 departments, 4 states, service delivery models, including all volunteer, now mostly career, and everything in between. Joe has a lot of good experience as to recruiting and retaining that will be useful for all of us. He also has been a contract instructor for IAFC's recruitment retention coordinator certification course. So with that, we'll get started. Thanks so much, Chief Joe Page, for presenting tonight. Again, put your questions or comments in the chat box, and we will hold a group discussion after Chief Page finishes with his presentation. So Chief Joe Page of Whitefish Fire Department.
Lynn, thank you so much. Like they said, I gave this presentation before. Hopefully some of you saw it, which means you'll all have comments at the end so we can share the wealth of knowledge. We talked about how many departments I worked for. We all had the same problems everywhere, different states, different size departments, they're all the same. Right now in Whitefish, we're a mostly career department, and that's not by choice. I can't find volunteers, which I'm sure a lot of us are experiencing that same problem. So sometimes we start looking at who are we looking for to help us? And while we would all like more structural firefighters, when you think of all the things that we ask our members to do, maybe we should bring in some members that are non-operational to help ease the burden on some of our volunteers. Some of the smaller departments, you guys all wear so many hats. If we had somebody volunteering with a little legal experience, fleet maintenance, the accounting, those are all things that we end up dumping on our volunteers a lot of times. So it's other things that we can look at to try to help us. And again, when we start looking even at our operational jobs, you know, we all look at the structural firefighter. but we do a lot of other stuff. Of course, EMS is dominant for at least us up here. We also have wildland, tech rescue. We need people to, help drive our apparatus. Maybe we don't need everybody to be an operational firefighter paramedic. We can start splitting and letting people certify in just the jobs they would like to do and not have to do everything. One of the other big questions is how many people do we really need? Now, the NFPA has set up a bunch of standards, and I understand we don't, it's a consensus safety standard, it's not law, but it gives us an idea of how many people we should have on scene. NFPA 1720 is for the combination and volunteer departments, and you look at timeline to getting firefighters on scene. That's a goal that we should be shooting for. So especially when you're dealing with politicians and people, you can bring these numbers up and be able to show them, yeah, we have 50, 60 people on our roster, but we're not meeting some of these requirements of having, say, 10 firefighters on scene within 10 minutes, 80% of the time. So help them understand our staffing problems.
Chief Page, we're not seeing your slides.
Oh. What are you seeing? Just me? Sorry.
I have the PowerPoint program, but not the slideshow.
Oh, okay.
If you have a couple different monitors going, you may need to adjust that.
Yeah, let me.
And where you've got the slideshow going, or disconnect from the extra monitors. That works. It's still it.
Are you seeing it now?
Now I've got File Explorer.
Huh.
And I had the PowerPoint program will be fine. You can just step through the slides. We can see that. It's not the slideshow itself, but we can see the slides if you were stepping through.
Sorry.
Okay.
You seeing it now, Lynn?
We've got the home PowerPoint program, which you can step through the slides on there. We can see them fairly well if you just maximize that.
Okay.
Okay, that'll work.
So here we go. I was talking about the NFPA standards for the staffing model. We now start talking about how do we attract our members, people to join. A lot of times we're all been successful with word of mouth. There are people doing job fairs during your open house. A lot of times what I'm thinking we need to do is make sure there's name recognition. People know which department you are. When you got people interested, they've probably been thinking about it for a long time. When you're ready to make the step to say, yes, I want to volunteer, there's been probably numerous places where they've interacted with you, either seen your material or saw you in action. So a lot of different methods is good for getting your name recognition out there. So when people are ready to make the move, they know where to go. A lot of times there's both good news and bad news out there. You're talking to people, and a lot of times we hear them say, hey, I didn't know you were a volunteer. The other thing that we have to deal with is the news media loves to bring up the bad. So here is an example of a picture that went on News 4 where they said former firefighter charged with in a beating case. Why did they have to say former firefighter? Why are, at this point he was former. The department actually knew to get rid of this guy. It was a bad thing. So it's hard to combat those kind of stories, but you need to do that with flooding the news agencies with good news. You should have regular articles that you provide that are easy for them to fill space with, fill time with, produce little videos, produce good stories, a member of the month or something. Just keep getting the good word out there. One of the things that I like is making sure that we're not all competing with each other, so that I'm trying to steal volunteers from the neighboring community. We really do need to work together. A really good example, if you guys ever want to take a look, is the Oregon Fire Recruiting Network. In there, they list all the fire departments in Oregon, who the contact is if you're interested in volunteering. They also have tons of information that we could all use. They've got sample SOPs, they have task books. There's a lot of information. It's one of the best websites I've seen for that kind of stuff. So they're worth looking at. Now, when I talk about name recognition, you think about all the logos that you're familiar with. A lot of times you don't hear the commercial, you just see the logo. So what I've kind of done with our fire department, we all know the Maltese cross represents the fire service. So in my case, I threw our city logo in the middle, and then I remind the public of our all hazard. We provide fire, rescue, EMS, and hazmat. So it helps people recognize that we do a lot of stuff, and I want them to recognize our logo when we're there. When you start doing that, you think about product placement. Where do you put your logo? You look at these photos here, just the Pepsi logo behind Mel Gibson, or the Nike swoosh on the shoes, or the Doritos. Those companies pay big money for product placement. You have walking billboards that are part of your department, the t-shirts that they're wearing, the sides of your truck, and then when you're out doing other things. You can think of some of your recruitment fairs, or people with their license plate. The public will recognize them as firefighters, and it's another great way to get your name out there. Now, we all know sometimes we can't really pick what member the public's going to come up and approach to. And we all have people that are really good talking to the public, and we have some other members we probably wish wouldn't talk to the public. One of the things I know a fire department did back east was they gave all the members a little index card to carry around with the key points that they wanted. If somebody asked them about their department that they wanted the member to talk about, just help them, here's some key things, here is the person they should call and contact. So that really helps versus having them talk to somebody who really isn't your best spokesman. The other thing is, where do we put some of our material? Now, a lot of people spend a lot of money designing those threefold flyers. And while they're handy at sometimes, I don't think a lot of us spend a lot of time reading them. You see these display racks all the time. It's good to provide information that somebody wants interest, but we're looking at trying to draw people's attention to us to look for interest. So one of the things I've seen people do is print out a bunch of placemats to give to their local diner. You're all sitting there waiting for your food to be delivered. You look down, you kind of read the placemat. So it'd be a good time to design something that says, hey, we're volunteer fire department. This is where you apply. Maybe have some photos, some other information. Then you start thinking about where else do you want to have your name? Now, the photo on the left would be a bulletin board at the community college. We have the paramedic program down at the Flathead Community College. So that's a good place for us to recruit for members. So getting our information there. The other place that's really good is like the hardware store. People are waiting in line. to the cash register. The people that are at the hardware store are people that are doing their own repair work, or a Home Depot or something. These are the types of people that work well in the fire department. So take advantage of the time they have while they're in line reading, getting your name there. Be careful of your message. I don't know how many of you know Tiger Schmittendorf. He was out at the Chiefs meeting a couple of years ago. He does a lot with volunteer fire departments. One of the big things he talks about is making sure you don't portray yourself as a sinking fire department. Nobody joins the Titanic Fire Department. You look at that lower picture, we'll help. If you don't help us, we're going to close. That's not a way to recruit people that want to join. Then the next thing you really got to do is, who are you trying to attract? The younger population use their cell phone all the time. They're not on Facebook. That's for old people like me. We use Facebook. The young people are using Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, short little videos, things that you could build together yourself just to get out there. But you want to attract the younger people to looking for you, for your department. One of the things that I've been doing is using the QR code, which drives the people to my website. So I have to have a good website that answers all their questions. But when you're meeting kids for the first time, they're not going to ask all those questions. They'll go at their pace. So I do a poster that has my logo for name recognition and the QR code that they could snap on their phone and start looking at our website when they're ready. The other place that we fail a lot is when an applicant actually applies or calls up and wants to talk to somebody and we don't answer them fast enough. We're slow in responding. We really have to make sure there's somebody in your department that's going to answer any requests or information right away. People don't want to wait. And then if you do talk to them and you're setting up another meeting or a ride along or something, be real honest about when that's going to happen. Don't make them feel like it's going to be a day or so when it's going to be a week or so before you get back to them. One of the things that's important is to look at the application process that you're running people through. You've got somebody who's interested, you want to get them to an information packet. Based on the information, maybe they're going to apply. Then you're going to have your process of interviewing your candidates. Some departments are doing elections. You need to elect people. Then you make a conditional offer. If you end up talking to some of the lawyers, you really should not be doing background checks until after you've made a conditional offer. The offer is conditional on them successfully completing a background check, whatever else you're using. Then the final step, which is very important, is your onboarding process. When they walk through the door, do they know the process? How are they going to meet everybody? Or is it really left to their own? So when we look at some of the different positions that might go on, when I talked earlier about non-operational, some of the things that I've looked at doing is we have ambulance driver only positions. Somebody who's got their AMT or more that wants to come and drive our ambulance, that frees up one of our firefighter paramedics. We also have people that like to drive in the back of the ambulance. They want to treat people. So we allow them to be members that are either EMTs or paramedics. My exterior firefighters are usually people that are not SCBA qualified. They're either in training or they're older members that are going to come and help, but they're just not going to go interior anymore. Then we have our interior firefighters. We have our driver operators that are going to drive and pump our engines and tenders. This was a good place for me to get some of the guys from my public works to volunteer. They're all driving heavy equipment all the time. They know how to pump. Farmers are all know how to pump, grabbing them. And then, of course, the wildland firefighters that we can grab and set that up. So what I typically do with those positions, they all have specific training requirements and things. And the way I help my officers figure out who can do what is based on the turnout gear. So if you're qualified as a wildland firefighter, you have the wildland PPE. If you're not qualified, you do not have wildland PPE. The interior firefighters have what I call the traditional style helmet. My exterior firefighters have the bullet side helmet. So we're able to spot people on what they can do easily. The other things we're looking for is somebody to help us with training officer, safety officer, deciding what positions you need and how you're going to help people advance to those positions. On the non-operational side, which is one of the areas that I think really helps, is having people that will help you. Recruitment coordinator, that's somebody who'll take on this recruiting and retaining firefighters. Having an attorney help your department. People who do public education, fire inspections, having a department historian, an accountant. There's a lot of jobs that we can take off the shoulders of our responding firefighters and allow them to be in. And then giving people an understanding of the path that how they can get to some of these other positions. Now, one of the things is we all know there's the hierarchy of people's needs that we talk about. A lot of the different perks that we can offer in a fire department, we always say, oh, okay, that's the member, he was just in it for the t-shirt. We can provide meals at training, teaching first aid, especially to help them with their families, helping them. FirstNet offers some lower price cell phone plans. Departments can put together a LOSAP, a length of service awards program, or a 457. Providing all your free fire and EMS training. If you can't pay for it, you help out some. Providing a gym facility or workout. These are all perks that we can offer some of these people coming in. Once they come in, we have to look at the onboarding process, and we need to make sure it's uniform for everybody. So how do they get introduced to your department? When do they get their department ID? One of the things we always laughed about was, when do you find out the door code to get in the building? We want these people to respond. We need to get them this information, and we need to get them their uniform, PPE, and all that other stuff. Don't forget their family. Their family needs to be involved in this. We're counting on people to spend a lot of time at the station training, but also responding to calls. It's important that the family recognizes the commitment that's being made, and that the family is also joining the department. So getting the spouse involved. A lot of times I will sit there and, geez, the spouse is somebody else I can recruit to come on, getting that stuff done. Now, there is a recruitment and retention coordinator certification program, and that's run by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. These are free trainings that are grant funded through the SAFER program also. The next one I know is happening is September 10th and 11th up in Alaska. If you're interested, if you contact Derek, you might be able to go up. Now, when I say free, it's free airfare, housing, and meals for that weekend. So you typically travel up on a Friday and travel home on a Monday. And that's a 2-day course to help with recruitment and retention. And there are other dates scheduled, but if you contact Derek, you can find out about the future dates on that class. Some of the other resources that are available is through the International Association of Fire Chiefs. The VCOS section is very popular. The Oregon Fire Recruitment and Network is the one that I talked about earlier. Firerecruiter.com, firelogblog.com. These are all online resources that you should be using to help you. But the biggest thing is be consistent, don't give up. If we work together, I think we can do this. Again, like I said, there's no golden ticket. I don't have this magical answer how we're going to find them. I know up here in Whitefish, with the number of tourists, the retirement, and the second homeowner units, those are all people that are not going to volunteer for me. So I have to find ways to recruit those people that are already living here. People are not going to move here and afford to live here. I'm sure you're all experiencing some of the price shocks on housing. Getting people involved, you got to keep working at it. You got to make them want to be a member of your team. So I'd like to open it up for questions to see if any of you guys, actually shouldn't say questions. I want to hear what's successful for you. What have you been doing that's working? Because I sure could use some help.
Okay, thanks for the presentation, Chief Page. Red Lodge says that there's a recruitment or retention coordinator training in Phoenix in September 18th and 19th. So thanks for posting that. So great presentation. And then part of what we're doing here is to talk to each other and as Chief Page said, find out what we're doing, what's working, or I don't know, just war stories. What have we done that didn't work, or times we shot ourselves in the foot and we're slow to respond or realized we had issues, because all of us really are dealing with the same issue. So chat's up there if you have questions, comments. You also can unmute you if you want to tell us about your experiences with it.
Hey, Chief, I got a question.
Yep.
This is Chief Hanson in Chinook. How do you, I've heard this before, but how do you put on people that don't want to be a firefighter? How do you have somebody like drive an apparatus? They're plumb capable driving apparatus. What do you do for insurance? Workers' comp or that type of thing?
Well, we're lucky here in Whitefish that my volunteers are all kind of volunteering for the city, and they're added on our workers' comp policy. So when they become a member, and I have set requirements, we're going to still put them through a driver training program, things like that. And we have set number of training hours that they have to attend. But we're lucky here because I know some departments actually have to struggle with getting people on their workers' comp, but for us, it's been pretty easy.
Craig, this is Lynn. We don't have, we do state work comp as most departments probably do. They're not municipal. So two options. Since going to a flat rate for the firefighters, it's fairly reasonable to put somebody on. The other thing I've heard of departments doing is using a different code for that. So actually fairly specifically coding for what that person is doing. So I know some of the departments are doing that with a non-firefighter code. We're currently just coding them as firefighters since it switched to the flat rate and seemed like a more reasonable rate than it used to be.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Joe, this is Dan, Kalispell Fire. One of the things that we're probably going to be looking at, you guys have probably heard the Montana Consortium. Here, let me turn my video on here. Sorry, you guys. The Montana Consortium that was just done in Great Falls. There were 300 candidates, and of those 300, there were only 13 or 15 paramedics. So those of us who do ALS, transport, and first response, like Joe said, we're in a lot of hurt for finding members. So next year, City of Kalispell, we're going to definitely entertain the idea of single role persons, and that'll probably be single role paramedics. It's just so hard nowadays to try to find firefighter paramedics. And we've actually lost some people who, sad to say, their interest is more in EMS than fire. So I'm not sure what's wrong with them, but we've had some folks leave and go fly with Alert or go with other agencies just for the medical part. So the hospital recently, we're working with Logan Health, and they're starting their own ambulance service. Actually, this week was their first day, June 6th, and they haven't had any problems finding paramedics from out of the area, which is unusual, but Joe mentioned the state of Oregon. They're becoming the leaders in a lot of things, and a lot of departments now in the state of Oregon are going to single role paramedics. And I think that's something that those of us who do both Havre and Whitefish, Kalispell, we're going to really have to seriously look at single role paramedics. And that's what we're going to entertain next year. Is we'll probably start with 2, just paramedics. And if they have an interest eventually into the fire service, that's a great way to look at a possible candidate as well too, to have them employed as a paramedic first. So yeah, it's sad to say, but with what's going on in the country right now, the great resignation, it's very difficult. It seems like it's sad to find firefighter paramedics. I think we can all remember the days that there would be 300, 500 people apply for a couple of jobs. And now it's, I know in Kalispell, we've had it where we've just had one person show up for an interview when we were trying to hire multiple people. It's pretty sad. So, but anyhow, that's what we're going to try next year is single role responsibilities as far as paramedics, and we'll see how it goes there. So
Yeah, thanks, Dan. One of the things I've heard some departments doing is starting to hire people that maybe don't have their EMT yet or their paramedic yet, bringing them in and actually providing that EMT training as part of their fire academy. So paying for that, especially in the larger career departments that are struggling. I'm hearing that a lot now, is we have to offer the EMT class and then take the ones we want and bring them into the paramedic class. So we're going to have to start investing more in the people that we're bringing on. Now, granted, that's different for the career departments than say the volunteers, but finding ways to get tuition assistance is one of the benefits we got to start looking at.
Yeah, Chief, along that line in Sealy Lake, we had a position for a full-time firefighter paramedic open in applications. We didn't get any, and ended up lowering it down to a firefighter EMT with the opportunity to go to paramedic school, and we ended up picking up a full-time guy
Good.
that way. But yeah, the pickings are pretty slim.
One of the other things that some people have done is offered help getting a CDL. Not that a CDL is required, but we have the vehicles that they could use to take the test. So a lot of times that helps us get these driver-only positions where we can teach somebody to pump and they're already a pretty good driver. They're looking for a CDL to help them with their daytime job.
hey, John, I got the police chief in Kalispell is going to retire to Sealy Lake. Maybe you know him, Doug Overman, and he's been talking a lot about being a fireman lately. So maybe we can get him to become a medic too and help you guys out down there.
That'd be good, Lynn.
Craig, I got to ask you, are you still doing puppets?
No, we're not.
I remember many years ago us doing puppets at Great Falls, Billings, and all over the place. I just had to bring that out. Those were good times.
Yeah, I'm getting too old for that puppet stuff anymore.
Thanks for the questions and comments. I'll sort of prompt some things. So just as last time, I made a list of things here kind of that caught my attention. One of them was slow to respond. Does anybody have a story of how they're doing that right to be able to really purposefully, whether using a checklist or whatever, to get somebody from start to finish, and how long in reality is that process taking? And there's some efficiencies that we can pick up in that area. The story I always think of is that I may have told this one last time too. I had a local chief ask me how I got such a great firefighter, and I didn't tell him he'd applied to that department and they've been so slow responding that he joined mine. So any thoughts on the sort of the onboarding process and how we can improve that? Anybody doing anything that's really working?
Yeah, no, Lynn, we just recently, working with FSTS, we just had the first Firefighter One Academy in Columbia Falls. And the city of Columbia Falls offered to pay for 2 of their members to go through the 2-week academy. So these folks, obviously they had to get vacation time, but they went from not having any certifications to coming out of that in 2 5-day, weeks with their Firefighter One certs, and then moving on to Firefighter Two. So that is a great way, if departments can afford it, is to use the Firefighter One Academy, the FSTS. And I believe now they're going to have 2 in the state, 1 in Great Falls in September, and then they're going to be back in Columbia Falls again this next year. So we were able to fill our academy and still have a waiting list for the next one. So that was a locally fire Columbia Falls Fire Kalispell had 4 of their own there, but within a very short amount of time, it's Firefighter One.
Hear how that went. Couple thoughts, one of which is, yeah, that we as departments, subject to coming up with the money, if we can use that money to support people on training, I feel like a lot of times we're a little bit stingy with that, and we're getting volunteer firefighters, and so, okay, well, we need to come up with a couple thousand. Somehow a lot of us seem to come up with the money to buy pumpers, seem to come up with the money to buy all sorts of gear, and are really hesitant to spend money on people. And both it's a recruitment and retention thing, as far as it shows them you care. Also, we have people through my department who are looking at becoming eventual career firefighters, and it's, we get them for a couple great years, and it works well for us and it works well for them. And the formal training and certifications matter for those. So that's interesting that's working for you guys. The September one will be in Helena, I think.
Okay. One of the things, Lynn, I was going to bring out was the community of Ferndale, Montana. They supported one of their, he's actually the lead brewer for Tamarack Brewing in Lakeside, but the community paid the $1,600 for his academy, and they also paid for his wages lost from his job. So the community paid for that. Also, Columbia Falls, the Rural Fire Board helped to pay for that as well too. So these small communities also that, they give so much to their volunteer fire department, a lot of times they're able to come up with some funds to assist with that too. So that's something to think about.
No, that's great to hear, because yeah, if nothing else, it's a suggestion to our people that they matter to us, and we're willing to invest in them. I'm always amazed. Young firefighters will come to me and ask about doing an EMT class, and it'll be $600, $700, $800, and they're just, you can see they're even afraid to ask. And I want to say, no, I would love to spend that on you. And part of that was we did have to go out for a mill levy to get a little more funding for that. But as far as I'm concerned, the way I need to look at that as a chief is, that I get a quality EMT for $800. That's a bargain. Because we are an all-volunteer fire department, and I'm not paying their salary. And so it's sort of a mentality shift from, oh, I don't know about that, what if they leave, to, invest in our people. And sometimes they do leave, but a lot of them don't. And a lot of them do stay as quality folks.
Yeah, I'm always happy if they stay in the fire service. Maybe they don't stay with us, but they move on somewhere else and continue to volunteer.
Absolutely. One of the slides that I wanted to call out was, Joe, you mentioned NFPA standards on staffing for fires, and that our knowledge of that and a real honest look at how we're actually staffing can maybe help us when we have to go out and say what we're doing is not working, and part of the fix is more money, tax funding, mill levy, whatever your funding structure is. Yeah, that slide was up near the start. And so, yeah, the other thing is that, if we're going back to our board and saying, why is our ISO rating what it is? Ultimately, ISO is your compliance with NFPA standards. And this is a real clear-cut way. If we're tracking it, we're doing our run reports and seeing are we actually doing it? And if not, that's a problem. We may need money or something else to fix when we go to make an argument to our board why we need more money. Because it's not gonna, I guarantee you, if you haven't been laying the groundwork the first time you walk into your board and say, yeah, how about a tax increase? It's not gonna be all roses.
Yeah, I know where we are, I'm never going to be able to meet a lot of these standards alone. I need to have my automatic and mutual aid partners really helping me meet those standards. But I've got that laid out so my city council is aware of what my target is. Like you talk about the ISO rating, we'll eventually get some pressure from the citizens that are paying the high insurance. At least having that a target that I'm shooting for out there.
Absolutely. Well, and I suspect there may be, and it's tough to say on ISO ratings because that's, when ours dropped, my insurance dropped significantly, but obviously State Farm and some others don't really use that. But yeah, making sure that we aren't being penny wise and pound foolish on underfunding our fire department and causing a rating where maybe we could have gotten a hauled water credit if we'd set things up differently and spent a little more on the fire side. That would have helped with some of the 9 and 10 ratings that we probably see out in our unhydrostated areas as we get further from our stations. One of the things I've tried to do is when I do buy a new rig, buy one with 4 to 6 seats. I may not have the staffing today to justify it, but I'm always recruiting. And I think it's funny, it's such a little thing, but one of the things that just kills volunteer motivation is not having a seat on the truck. And so, I've just been trying always, even if I don't think I need a crew cab, I just buy it because I want to work towards these staffing standards, even though I don't have them now. Just because I don't meet the standard doesn't mean it doesn't apply to me or isn't, the collective knowledge of the fire service's best practices. So one of the other slides, and we'll see what everybody's thoughts on this that I thought about was, what is your message? What do you put on banners? He had the picture up there of the join or we're going to close. Are we saying volunteers needed? Are we saying apply now? Are we saying, be part of the team? Is there any messages that are working, or some of you put out there that you wish you hadn't, or that have? What's some thoughts on that?
One of the things that I've noticed is, like I was talking about earlier, you never know when the person finally makes the decision. So getting your name out there and your signs out there, you might say, oh, nobody ever came in because of that poster we hung or that billboard we had. But you don't know if they've seen that 3 or 4 times and then went home and talked about it with their spouse and then hemmed and hawed for a while and then finally joined. So a lot of times getting that message out there numerous times, numerous places, I think is important.
Yeah, I think I don't know much about marketing, but I know that it takes a whole lot of, I don't know what they call them, touches or contacts or something before you seal the deal. So yeah, and we sometimes do an okay job of that, going down to the parade or putting banners out or like you say, the newspapers. A lot of us that have newspapers are hurting worse than we are. And so, if you call them up and hand them a story, they'll generally take it because they are absolutely strapped. And so, yeah, especially those of us that have kind of small town newspapers, they love stories about us. If we kind of feed them to them, and that's an easy way to get a contact point out there.
The other thing we've done somewhat successfully is the open houses and attracting the kids because their parents come with them. And so while we're entertaining the kids, we're also working on the parents. I mean, that's exactly what they did with seatbelts, right? They started telling all the kids, hey, you need seatbelts, make sure your parents are buckling up. And the kids actually drove that message home.
Absolutely. I think about how many times we've had, you know, an open house or something, and the little kids are the ones that'll come over, and it turns out mom or dad are kind of interested, but not quite willing to make the commitment at that time. And that's maybe somewhere where, when you talked about having the specific roles or limited commitment options, you know, some of that hesitation is, especially, I mean, we want people to see us training, but sometimes that may come across as, holy cow, it's a lot of hours, and it is. So maybe that's a way to say, hey, you know, volunteer in a capability that isn't being on call 24/7 in our traditional manner. So comment from Ed Lodge there. Their message is join our team, and trying to create a family atmosphere or a team atmosphere. And yeah, absolutely. I think our latest banners say be part of the community, and trying to do that. So Amy, can I prompt you on what's some intentional things that you've done to try and create that team atmosphere in the department?
A dinner before all of our trainings, and with the idea that everyone will come and eat together, and then we'll also have other events that are not just training. Again, with that idea around trying to have people get to know each other outside of just being a volunteer. With our EMS division, we actually have created teams, and those teams design trainings together and present trainings together. They will get together and practice whatever they need to outside of our other training opportunities. And I think just the atmosphere around the station is, I mean, we have people that come in and hang out all the time just because they like to be here. So kind of just creating that atmosphere at the station, that if you got some time and you just want to come in and shoot the shit, or you want to come in and help out on a rig check or something like that, that's great. So I guess that's a few of the things.
Absolutely. No, those are great ideas. And it's something I kind of have to remind myself. Anybody who knows me, kind of a nose to the grindstone. I'm like, if I've got our crew there, we're working our butts off the whole time. And even have to say, sometimes it's like, you know, as a volunteer firefighter, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's got to be satisfying. It's got to be, you know, there's a million, you know, by logic, we should be doing something else. So if it's not fun, satisfying, engaging, and yeah, there's times where it's okay to have it be fun and be a little relaxed. Now, of course, we know when it's business time, we gotta do what we gotta do to get the work done. But yeah, building that team atmosphere is a good goal for all of us. John says we have movie night for the kids and hold an open house and meet and greets twice a year. And that's produced a few members or contacts. I tell you what, open houses, I always feel like, oh, didn't we just do one? And then I'll look and it's been a couple years. But when I think back through some of our best numbers, you know, we got them via just doing the open house, which the thing is, it's always sort of, oh, we're going to do an open house. And then we have a ball doing it. The community likes it. Our people like it. So that's great to be doing that twice a year. If I take nothing else from tonight, I may take that back and be like, okay, time to do more open houses. And yeah. The other thing is, I think 2 stations. one of them is in a difficult spot to staff, and we target mailed a letter. Wasn't anything fancy. It was literally just an old school letter that said, you know, we need staffing in this area. If you're in these particular neighborhoods. And we got some great folks off that. We weren't saying we're going to close a station or anything, but just saying, you know, we do need you here in these areas to staff this station, and being specific on what we were asking for.
In addition to open houses, the department back in New York, we used to do an Easter egg hunt for the community kids. Halloween, we did a costume contest. Some of those things around some of the events that brought the families in. So they saw the fire department as something fun, not just a, you know, working fire department, but more of a community center.
Can you hear me? This is Kerry Phillips.
Yep.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I am Macomb County, Eastern Montana in Circle. I'm just wondering of any of the departments that are represented here tonight, does anybody do any kind of presentations at their local high schools? Like a junior firefighter type of deal to recruit, you know, the new ones coming in, the ones that are coming of age and starting them out young.
Great question. Who's got a cadet program? Anybody running one of those that's working?
I had one working when I was back in New York, but the real problem ends up being, again, staffing. But that's a place where you find somebody to help run that. Doesn't have to be a structural firefighter. Could be a retired firefighter or somebody else interested. It was a successful program back in Colorado. I have been unable to get one started here.
Has that been due to anything in particular or just somebody to run that program? Has that been the drawback?
That's been the drawback. My wife tells me I can't take on something else.
Yeah, Carrie, we talked about doing that in our local high schools. Our problem is, it's just my problem, but I hate to put all the time and stuff into kids when they're going away to college or they're going into the army, or they're moving out of the area, or whatever it is, because there's just no jobs here. And it's really hard for us to focus on getting those kids for 3-4 months, going to all that work, putting them on, and maybe that's a bad way to look at it, and then have them just totally move out of the area and move to where their jobs are. Or to join the army. I know I had one kid a couple years ago, wanted to join, turned 18, still in high school, getting ready to graduate. I asked him what his intent was after school, and he said he's going into the military. And I said, well, come see me when you get back from the military, if you ever come back. So that's my hang up with it.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. That would probably be the case here. I mean, there's a lot of this is a town of less than 500 people, and that's what happens to a lot of the ones that graduate from high school is they do go to college and then they end up getting jobs elsewhere. And there's a few that move back. It's mostly a farm and ranch community. And we do have a few of those that have come back, but they graduated 3-4 years ago, went to college, and then they come back. So, 1 or 2 of those, 3 of them, I guess we've got over the past few years. But yeah, the pickings are pretty slim because they get better jobs in the bigger towns, bigger cities, and stuff like that. So I was just wondering if anybody did have any success with a program. So yeah, thank you.
And I know I've been cussed out before by people saying, well, you get them for those 3 months. Well, that's true, but we've also spent effort we do a task book here, and getting them to qualify for that task book takes the officers, a lot of nights of training and being away from their families, and then just to have those people up and move in 3 months. I mean, it's hard to justify that.
Absolutely, you do have to, okay, you do have to balance that. You know, we just finished doing our basic firefighter academy, and you know, it went fantastic, but it was a, you know, I always have to remember what a big lift that is for our company officers who basically run it. You know, I looked at their faces in the end, and they were happy it was ending. Because it is a big lift, and how we balance that out and make sure we're not burning folks out. We're going to end here in a couple minutes. Kim is going to put in the links for the evaluation and the certificate. So please, another pitch to fill out our eval. It helps us with our grant. There it is, just popped up. The last question I want to finish on here, and this is it's affecting a lot of us. It's, you know, Whitefish is certainly very acute in this, but housing. What are we doing about housing? Because, you know, in my district, it's, you know, to afford a house, you know, you're at least talking 2 pretty dang good jobs to keep up with the mortgage on a even a starter house. And so how do you know, it's tough to ask somebody who's working tons of hours at a high-powered job to come volunteer. They just don't have the time. They're not our traditional demographic. So is anybody successfully addressing the housing issue, which seems to be only getting worse? And it's not just in the bigger cities, it's affected a whole lot of folks out of the cities too.
One of the things, Lynn, that you guys probably saw in the news, Kalispell, I think Central Valley was trying as well too, to repeal the residency requirement. So even with volunteers, we actually have quite a few volunteers for other organizations that live in the city of Kalispell. In fact, Joe's got some that live down in the city of Kalispell that volunteer for him. And I think that's something we need to think about. You know, if we have a large fire event, you're going to be working over maybe 1 work period, maybe more. We need to free up that residency requirement a little bit. So we were successful in passing ours last night. Ours was pretty strict. It was 15 minutes or 3 air miles. And you guys, like Whitefish, you guys know Kalispell is insane. I as the fire chief, I made offers on a duplex multiple times. They were asking for 25, and then they went over close, or they were close to 500,000. I don't even qualify for that with my salary. That's how insane it is here. So we can't expect a firefighter making $50,000 a year to buy a place for 500,000. So now the living requirement, there is no living requirement. The expectation is your shift starts at 7 in the morning. If you want to live in Polson, where it's more affordable, that's your right. And in that case, that's what we had to do to free that. But I think even as volunteer organizations, you may have to expand that radius out a little farther as well too, to maybe capture some more assistance as far as additional members.
That's true. We actually recently had to change our bylaws. There was a limit to the percentage of out-of-district members, because I pulled the numbers, and in-district members on average stay 4 times as long as out-of-district members. But, you know, that's all well and good until there just aren't any. And so we're getting pretty good out-of-district members. We do understand they don't stay as long, but no, we loosen that percentage up. You know, and I think the next step for us will probably be going to some sort of shift structure where yeah, folks from a little further out can just come do a shift, because that's the other question with, as a volunteer fire department gets busier and busier, shifts to where we can say to somebody, do your shift, but otherwise you're off. Because that's part of the tough ask of a volunteer firefighter. I know all of us live it every day and are sort of like, well, why can't somebody else do it? But we can say that right up until we don't have members with that. So Chief Page, thank you. You want to give us a parting thought here? I'm trying to end right about an hour. Thank you so much for the presentation. And so last thought, Chief Page.
My last thought is don't give up. You know, we got the volunteer fire service is near and dear to my heart, and we're all struggling, even the career side, but let's not give up. Let's work together. There was one other thing I just wanted to add that we did back in New York, was we had people, you could only volunteer for one department. So I had people in the neighboring department that would work in my district. So we made them what we called mutual members. So basically they carried my pager also. So when they were, during the day when they're in my district, they could respond. We added a training requirement, just like we call mutual aid or automatic aid. It was a way of grabbing those people that were living in one town and working in another to be able to help respond. I really think we need to be looking to work together a lot more.
That makes a ton of sense, especially, talking about doing the joint academy in Columbia Falls. Here we do a joint multi-department academy. And then, I'm going to lock those folks out of my station.
Yeah.
Essentially what, on one level, what we're doing now. So that's a great point. So thanks, everybody. We really, really appreciate your time. Next month, developing a communications plan, Liz Loomis, Wednesday, the 20th, 6:30. Thank you. As Chief Page said, don't quit, keep it up. Always be recruiting. And thanks, everybody. Thank you, Chief Page. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.